Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of the Corporate Governance Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council website after the meeting. I have received apologies from Mr. Bill this morning. Before we start, I'd like to welcome our two new independent members to their first formal meeting. That's Mr. Grimes and Mr. Maxfield. Welcome. So the first item on the agenda is the minutes. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of May 2023 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Yeah. Question time. No questions have been received from the public. Questions asked by members under Standing Order 7. I have received no questions from members. I have no urgent items. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations they wish to make? Terry.
Usual one, Chairman, agenda item 12, Lloyds Bank pensioner.
Thank you. Yep. Yes.
Yes, I'd like to make a declaration of interest regarding item 8 around the standards regime. In fact, I am an independent person appointed by the council.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Good point. So the next item, we have no petitions have been received. The first substantive item is the Insurance Services Annual Report 2022-23. Neil Jones, Head of Internal Audit, will introduce this item, and he is supported by James Colford, Technical Underwriting Manager. We're also joined online, I believe.
For Chair, also Hayley Adams from our insurance brokers, Marsh, attending today.
Okay, so we've got Hayley Adams from Marsh Limited.
Thank you.
Welcome, Hayley. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. So for the benefit of members, I in the past I've reported insurance normally as part of the risk management paper, but I wanted to bring what I consider to be an important function to the forefront, really. So going into the report, paragraphs 2 to 6, just provide a little bit of background to the service, including its status, where it sits in the financial regulations of the County Council. There's a brief overview of the programme. We'll be bringing that to future committees. And then some information on the team, which is quite small and covers a wide scope, really. So over the year, there were 3 large-ish projects over the year, starting during 22-23. So firstly, in paragraphs 7 to 10, we explain how we went about the re-procurement of our broker, and that's Marsh, and Hayley's representing Marsh today. And it gives a couple of examples of how they have really provided benefit to the County Council's insurance service in the short tenure they've been here. Paragraphs 11 to 15 explain some work undertaken by our current insurer, which is Risk Management Partners, to review what's known as the Council's total cost of risk. So a bit more detail in those paragraphs. Overall, the insurer's comments, findings, and also their future predictions were really extremely positive and helpful to our future thoughts. And then the final project is covered in paragraphs 16 to 20. So for some years now, we've been due an actuarial review of the Council's liability funds. So these are the major funds to look after our large-scale claims in the future. And that review was around trying to determine if the funds were of sufficient value to be able to meet future claims, and also whether there was any scope to either move money from the funds and also look at the contributions into them. So that's been a really useful exercise, and what now is underway is an internal review of that to try and work out where we go next in stages going forward. So I think we'll be bringing something back to the committee, either as part of the risk management paper in a future report. Paragraphs 21-24 just provide an update. We had some historic insurance arrangements with Municipal Mutual back into the 60s and through to the 90s. So claims for incidents during that period are sadly still arising. and they are found, if they're found to relate to the council, then obviously we're liable for them, and we have to pay a levy of 25% on those claims are being paid back. The most recent MMI accounts are mentioned in there as well, and that was reasonably positive. So that an increase to the levy of 25% isn't anticipated at this time, but obviously it can't be ruled out as more claims come to fruition. Paragraphs 25 to 27 then provide some information on the insurance services claims handling team, which is all internal, but with help from our legal colleagues and also external solicitors. Very well respected team in terms of claims handling, and extremely cost effective too. Appendix 1 on page 17 provides some data on claims during the year, and some of those are summarised back in paragraph 27. And then finally for this report, paragraph 28 just explains how officers in the service assist with mitigating risks to other departments' service provision, and the table in the report actually shows how well respected they are by others, the services by other officers. And then on Appendix 2 on page 19, I've listed some examples of where the team has been involved. So that's all I've got to say on the report. James, Hayley and I will be glad to receive any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. So have members got any comments or questions they'd like to raise? Terry.
Thank you, Chair. Just on Appendix 1, I probably should know by now, but obviously my one grey cell is stopped working. I just wonder what EL, PL and OI mean.
So EI is employer's liability, and that relates to claims for compensation brought by employees alleging negligence due to an injury they've sustained. PL is public liability, so that relates to third-party claims for compensation in respect of injury and property damage. And OI is officials' indemnity, so that relates to statutory functions, and again, it's where third parties allege that they've suffered financial losses due to negligence.
So, have we got any other queries? Yeah, Mr. Bannister.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure I've missed it, so it's my fault, but looking at Appendix 1, number of claims, is there somewhere in the report that indicates the amount of payment that has been made to meet those claims?
Yeah, we discussed this at briefing, and there was originally a line in there, but I took it out on the basis that it would probably cause more confusion in the small amount of time we have at this committee to be able to understand how those claims arise, because in Q1, for instance, there was a massive claim that was from 15 years ago, sort of thing. So it's understanding how the insurance line works. What we did agree as part of the briefing was that the actuarial review, which I mentioned in the report earlier on, we're picking through that now. That will provide much more clarity on where traditional historic claims have been and where we think future claims may be. So we will bring something back to the committee to explain that in a bit more detail.
If I may, Chair, thank you very much, Neil. And the sort of timescale that you think for bringing back that additional report to this committee will be when?
We're picking through the actuarial information now. There is a committee in November, so we could aim for November. I'd rather make sure that we're absolutely concrete, and also we'd need to be obviously really sensible in what we put into the public domain. So that will be, it could be the January committee.
Mr. Champion.
Thank you, Chair. Looking on page 12, item E, the reputation of highways claims was 93%, possibly the highest RMP had seen. I'm assuming quite a lot of those claims are things like potholes, that kind of stuff. So the only concern I've got with this is that we look really good and that we're able, which I knew had been there for months and months, but I'd missed it all down. When I tried to put a claim in, this is years ago, but when I was a councillor, I was just told, no, we've done an inspection on such and such a day, and it wasn't spotted, and so you can't claim. And at that point, you're pushed back, you can't go no further. And I knew that it had been there much longer and obviously it just been missed. So the only worry I have is that we're great at pushing these things back, but at the same time, we need to make sure we're fair with the public. We know there's pothole problems across the entire county. If we're pushing too hard, if we're overzealous, if we're acting like an insurance company rather than a council that's responsible for its roads, it's a little worrying that 93% could be because we're just pushing people back because we think we've got ourselves covered rather than actually being fair and genuine. And as I say, I know from myself that I had a genuine case, but there was nothing I could do, couldn't take any further because the council had a date on which it was inspected.
Yeah, I fully understand what you're saying, and you're amongst many people who feel the same way. I can assure you, in my tenure as looking over the insurance, it's a very, very rigorous process that is followed, and it is backed up by statutory defence. So this is, you can't possibly be responsible for all of the highway at all of the time. That's where it comes from. There are a number of obviously disappointed people who, push further back, and we go back in the same sort of routine really in terms of explaining how that's arisen, and then fortunately their only sort of resolve was to go through small claims courts really, try and get that way. There's obviously within the last part of the paper, there's reference to the team, the insurance services sort of assistance with the highways staff in terms of making sure that they're on top of their. It's the highway staff who need to fill the potholes, obviously, and the insurance team who get the brunt of any claims coming through. So there's lots and lots of trying to progress this to make it a better situation.
Okay, thank you. So how's Bill?
Some of these claims are extremely old. Doesn't the statute of limitations cut in somewhere on all these claims or not?
There is a statute of limitations that applies to contract and debt recovery and that sort of thing, also to personal injury and negligence, but that's not, there is an opportunity. So, for example, if someone's been subject to abuse or something like that in the care of the county council as a child or young person in our care, the statute of limitations is applied in a generous way because there's an understanding that it wouldn't have been possible for that child or young person to bring a claim within the usual sort of 12-year time frame for that. So there is some flexibility around that. And the other thing around the claims management, I guess, that Neil has referred to, is that a claim may start, at one point, and it may take 4 or 5 years to come to its conclusion through the legal process. So although they may not all be historic in nature, the litigation process, unfortunately, is not a speedy affair.
Okay, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just really coming back on the responses to Councillor Bannister, if I may. A couple of things. I mean, obviously we've got the public watching this, so I wouldn't want the public to think, I know you probably didn't mean to say those words, Neil, but you said in the short time we have. This committee has as long as we need to actually do our job properly, and if that means we sit until 5 o'clock, so be it. But secondly, the other bit about coming back with the figures, surely it's not beyond our wit, and I'm sure Lauren can advise us on this, that we can, as a committee, take an exempt report. So if we are concerned about any information going into the public domain, and in all the years I think I've sat on this committee, we've never used exempt reports, and I think there is a case for actually using them so this committee can be properly informed at an earlier time, rather than wait till you say it's cast in concrete. Well, by then we're not doing our job. So I think we should actually, if we've only got half it, let's sit and look at it and have a discussion on it as an exempt report.
We can certainly look at the exemptions around information around the commercial sensitivity, really, of the county council, which is the potential grounds of an exemption that I think we'd be looking at. Yes, that's something we could take away and review.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Thank you, Lauren. So, do we have any more questions from members? No, we don't. So, we're asked to, moving to the recommendation, then on page 50 of the agenda, we're asked to note the annual report now provided. Is that agreed? Mm-hmm. Yep. So, thank you, Hayley and James, for joining us today. You can leave now if you wish, or of course you are welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting. So I suspect you might want to go. Right. Thank you. So moving on to the next item on the agenda is the annual report on the operation of the Members' Code of Conduct 2022 to 23. Lauren Haslam, Director of Law and Governance, will present this item. So Lauren, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. As members will be aware, the terms of reference of this committee include promoting and maintaining high standards of conduct by members, advising the County Council on the adoption or revision of the Members' Code of Conduct, and monitoring the operation of the Code of Conduct. This is an annual routine report to the committee, and it's designed to fulfil the last function of monitoring the operation of the code. Members will recall the County Council adopted a new code, the LGA model, with some minor adjustments in common with the 7 district councils within Leicestershire. And under that code, since July 2022, there have been 8 complaints. The details of these are contained in the table at paragraph 5, with the comparison data to last year as well. Members will note there are low levels of complaint, and whilst there is never room for complacency, I think it's a pleasing picture, and I think it reflects positively on the ethos and values of this council. In all cases, I've referred complaints to the independent persons appointed under the Localism Act. Their role is to act as a critical friend and to give a view of the layperson on the issues raised. And I take this opportunity to record my thanks to the independent persons whose views I value, and I've found them always to be engaged and interested in the complaints process. At paragraph 8, I refer to the staff survey, which was undertaken earlier this year, which is being reviewed at present. And one of the questions related to the staff engagement with members. And I expect to issue a summary of the findings of the survey and advice to members that flow from that in the next week or so. Just turning back briefly to the independent person's role, to note the terms of office for the independent persons expire this time next year. So over the course of the next 12 months, arrangements will be made to recruit through the appointment committee and eventual formal reappointment or appointment by the County Council. And just finally, as part of the regular meetings and engagement with independent persons, we facilitated a training session earlier this year, and we reviewed a protocol that's been developed through the LGA and Howie Ainscough, who are the sort of lead experts in this area. That covers the engagement with independent persons, and subject to approval by this committee and consultation with independent persons, I propose that this be appended to the guidance that we have on managing complaints, which was approved by this committee. Finally, just to note, Chair, that Mr. Grimes, who joins us today in his capacity as an independent member of this committee, also, as he's mentioned, serves as an independent person. I don't know, Chair, if you might want to invite him to make any observations he may have on the process before just noting from my perspective that the recommendations are contained at the end of the report, and the committee is just asked to note the report and offer any observations or comments that you may have on the protocol. Thank you, Chair.
So, Mr. Grimes, would you like to make any comment on the protocol?
Yes, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Chair. The protocol I see is the last piece of the jigsaw that's gone in since the Localism Act of 2011. Sorry, is this on? Yes, it is, sorry. The Localism Act of 2011 came in, and I do work with a number of authorities, and a number of them have different processes. There has been a process in place here in Leicestershire since the start of the new standards regime, but this really formalises and puts in place some of the background detail behind it so that everybody gets a very clear view of how things will operate between the monitoring officer, between members, and between the independent persons. So I think this is certainly a very good way forward, and it is, as Lauren said, it's based upon work done by the Local Government Association and with Hoey Ainscow. I have worked with Hoey Ainscow over quite a number of years, in a variety of settings, and they are experts in the field of standards within local authorities. So I very much welcome the protocol, and as Lauren said, this.
So, thank you, Mr. Maxfield. Appreciate those comments. Bill?
Basically, it's got no teeth at the moment. You can do as much as you like, but the member can actually say nothing, and nothing you can do about it.
There is nothing that I've seen indicating any change in the way in which the Localism Act is applied and the sanctions available to the council.
And I think it was reviewed about 12 months ago, wasn't it? I think that the whole process was reviewed, if I remember rightly, and the sanctions. But
yeah, we had, you're right, Chair. There was the Committee on Standards in Public Life, which reported probably 2 or 3 years ago now. We brought that to this committee. We reviewed that, went through it, but unfortunately it didn't make, well, fortunately or unfortunately, it didn't make any changes to the arrangements for sanctions.
So, Mr. Bannister.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very interested in Lauren's views, and thank you for the report, Lauren, about the independent persons or having their terms expire at the same time, and whether or not there is any case for a degree of continuity so that not all 6 have to be reappointed or advertised for new independent persons, whether or not there is a case for example, terms so that 3 and 3 could be appointed, so that whenever the terms end, there's always independent persons in office and able to continue with the work.
Yes, I mean, I certainly envisage and hope that we've got 6 independent persons at the moment. I hope that some of them were, in their first term, and I hope that they will reapply and be reappointed. We could look at staggering the terms of the appointment. At the moment, they're appointed, I think, for 4-year terms. There is no sort of barrier in terms of successive terms. I suppose there comes a point at which long-term appointments may cease to have that sort of element of independence. But in all honesty, with the number of complaints that we have and the level of engagement, I think the relationship between the council, the monitoring officer and the independent persons never becomes cosy, because we're not engaging on a day-to-day basis. It's many months between contacts in some cases. But yeah, I mean, certainly we could look at whether there's any merit in sort of staggering the appointment process. So you would, avoid a sort of cut-off point, which I think is the point you're getting at. Thank you.
It is. So thank you for indicating that some consideration will be given to that. Thanks, Lauren. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Maxfield, did you want to? Oh, sorry, Mr. Grimes.
No,
Maxfield. I got the wrong way around.
Yeah,
sorry,
that's fine.
Mr. Maxfield.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in relation to the complaints part of the report, so from paragraph 5 in the table underneath, I think I agree at the very top level. It does paint a rather, I guess, pretty picture in terms of the volume of complaints. I think we'd probably generate more assurance from this part of the report if, and whether that's here or elsewhere, having some insight into the nature of those complaints, and also our degree of conformity or compliance with, or the council's conformity with the guidance on complaints handling, and then whether in and of itself that guidance is adequate. It's a very hot topic at the minute now, not just with people in public life and complaints being received, but also the extent to which those accountable bodies have investigated thoroughly those issues. So I think I would be interested to not just see the very top level of the volume of complaints in simple terms, but the extent to which those have been thoroughly investigated.
Thank you. Yes, so after the committee meets, I do have a briefing in a confidential briefing session with the chair, vice chair and spokespersons of the committee, at which we do look in a bit more detail at the nature of the complaints. It's very clear, though, that this is a confidential process for members. It becomes not confidential when it gets to a member conduct panel, and obviously then it's open and generally the media might attend and there will be media interest. But the level of complaint and the issues subject to the complaints that we've looked at this year wouldn't, reach anything like the trigger to sort of become a sort of open complaint. Obviously, the role of the independent person is fairly key there, and particularly someone like Mr. Grimes, who's got experience across many other councils at a sort of threshold checking, if you like, I think is really perhaps what you're getting at, and also the discussion I will have after this meeting. I'm uncomfortable about making that more widely available, to be honest. I'll give it some more thought, but my instinct and my understanding of the way in which these things are dealt with at pretty much across the board is that the member confidentiality point is key for me. Your members are in a public profile, and it's very easy to sort of cast stones and make a lot of noise when there's actually no substance to it. And I just want to be very careful that we just get that balance right. But I take on board the point you're making about the climate in which we are in and the importance that flows from that of making sure we get the threshold right. I think that is an important point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mr. Maxfield. So are there any other questions or queries on the report? Okay, so moving to the recommendations, the committee is asked to note the contents of the report and provide any comments or observation on the draft protocol. I think we've done that. Is it agreed that we note this report? Thank you. So we move on to the next item, which is item 9, the risk management update. Neil Jones, Head of Internal Audit Services, will present this item. So over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the new members and new people at the committee, just to explain how it is. So I'll go through the cover report and then ask members to ask questions on that and or the appendix at the end, because it's normally the appendix A which tends to raise the most debate. So in the cover report, paragraph 6 explains that again there has been some movements in risks in the cycle, with 3 new ones being added. 1 has been removed and to be managed at departmental level, and 1 risk description has been amended. That always gives me assurance that the risk registers are live and they are being thoroughly evaluated when the departments pull them together. Starting at paragraph 7 through to paragraph 14, I'm aware that all members are receiving weekly updates, but I thought because of the continuing media attention, it'd be sensible to briefly explain how the council is managing the risks around buildings containing reinforced aerated concrete, RAC. So there remains no evidence of RAC in maintained schools, and work continues reviewing other types of buildings and liaising with our adults and children's party providers. So we wait for more guidance from the government on that. Hopefully things will begin to slim down and we can feed back more positive later. Starting at paragraph 15 through to paragraph 22, just thought I'd bring to the committee's attention that the government has revised and improved its national risk register. So we have distributed that in full, the full version, to directors, and some self-assessment of questions for them to review with their management teams. And then colleagues in resilience and business continuity team have offered to support the departments in self-assessing against those, and any impacts on those we'll bring back to a future committee. And rather than supply members with the full 85 plus pages, I've just included a link there to the contents of the register, which is on page 50 and 51 in Appendix B. The remainder of this report, really starting paragraph 23 onwards, relates to counter fraud. And firstly, there's confirmation that the National Fraud Initiative exercise for 2022-23 has completed. What is probably more of interest is that there are in paragraphs in here 23 to 32 that provide some examples of investigations that we had to undertake with departments. So there are some cases there, and also some examples of where we've tried to improve the control environment to avoid cases like those occurring again. And then finally, and this is just for information really, a notification there's a new economic crime bill on organisational failing to prevent fraud. My counter fraud lead has confirmed that the County Council is in scope for that, but he's undertaken a risk assessment, and we've returned low risk basically on the nature of the services that we provide, and also that we constantly review and catalogue our counter fraud controls and processes around insider fraud where employees may be trying to commit fraud. That's been quite lengthy. I'd like to offer members now the opportunity to ask questions on the report and its appendices. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Neil. So, members, have you got any queries or questions? Bill?
Thank you, yes. Page 34, item 27. This £400 duplicate payment. How did that come about? Page 34. So £900. Page 34, minute 27.
It's the £900 payment, I think.
Duplicate payment.
What I do know is that their systems have been improved to avoid it happening again. I think it's just come through in two varieties of payment. I can provide more by email if Mr. Bolter would like.
Okay.
To Ada Rose.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Now, yes, Mr. Champion.
Thank you, Chair. Now, on page 43, 7.4, there's just been new to the committee. LCC's charging policy challenged on the principles of the Norfolk ruling. What is the Norfolk ruling?
Yeah, so there was a ruling some years back now in Norfolk County Council where their charging system was deemed to be inappropriate and invalid. So it created a risk that could affect all councils across the country. So over the years, and Lauren will probably back me up with a little bit more information on this. Over the years, it's bubbled around in terms of not making it into the corporate domain because we've always maintained reviews of our charging policies and made sure that we're not gone down the same line. It's been brought into the domain, I'm guessing, because the likelihood is probably more now in terms of the more cases that are coming out. But as it says on there, there is a charging policy that hopefully mitigates that, going to be signed off by Cabinet in February. Lauren, do you have any more?
Yes, I'll just add to that, Neil. I think you've encapsulated it in essence. The Norfolk case related to a challenge by a resident in Norfolk around the way in which the council treated the benefit income that they got because of their disability, and it was taken into account in a way that the court found to be inappropriate. And we undertook at the time that that judgment came out to review, obviously, our policy to make sure we weren't falling into the same trap. And as did all councils, you know, it didn't just affect Norfolk, but actually our policy didn't have the same sort of issues arising. But it's something that we obviously want to keep under review and make sure we're looking at in the round because of our public sector equality duty as well. But obviously we want to make sure our policy is fair and robust and doesn't discriminate against people with a disability, which is what was found to be the case in Norfolk.
Thank you, Neil and Lauren, and thank you for the question, Mr. Champion. So, Mr. Grimes.
Thank you, Chair. On the risk register, 1.6 about special educational needs, I note it says that the TSIL programme is well underway in 12 work streams, etc., etc. Is it possible to have an update on a bit more, you know, that's sort of the headline? Is this the appropriate forum to discuss where we are with that programme? Because I mean, it clearly is a big impact on schools right across the county, or is that something that would be taken outside of the committee, Neil? It just seems to me a fairly major
Would that normally go through
piece of work.
I suppose it goes in detail two pieces. The actual financial piece normally goes through the scrutiny process. What would normally sort of take here is maybe that overarching, what have we got in place to sort of manage the sort of the SEND kind of pressures that we're facing at the moment. I think we have had presentations in the past. I mean, we can have a look back when the last time we brought something of substance to the committee that sort of just takes you through what is in place to manage SEND overall, and sort of bring something back on a future presentation if that works for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Declan. So, are there any other questions or queries? Mr. Maxfield.
Thank you, Chair. On page 42 in Appendix A, it's a risk reference number 7.1. Can I just check my understanding of that risk as it's expressed? Is the key issue here sickness absence within the council, or is it the poor management of absence?
So I suppose it boils down to, it's the impact of, I suppose the risk is we don't get a sickness absence down. One of the causes could be the sort of the poor management of the absence, but it fundamentally is just about, you know, the sheer, I suppose the number of sort of people off sort of sick on a sort of a recurring basis is higher than what we'd target, but it's not necessarily always down to poor management. Obviously can be other factors taken into that account as well. So it's probably, one's probably the core underlying one, and the other one is one of the potential, I suppose, effects or causes of that.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bannister. Mr. Bannister.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 40, risk number 1.9, regarding the immigration status of refugees and unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. I note that in the update, there are 15 letters before action referring to legal challenges with regard to the brief assessment. And I was just wondering, because at first blush that seems to be a lot. So is the trend in relation to this upwards, and the risk is even greater and will worsen?
I can't comment about the legal side, but as regards the trend, yes, it is upwards. I think there was a paper to scrutiny on this fairly recently in terms of the impact of the UASC on Leicestershire and Leicester itself. So yes, the trend is upwards. And will it worsen? I can't comment on that.
Yeah. Just to add a little bit, the problem with this issue, even though the numbers can look on sort of relatively small on the face of it compared to what we normally sort of see across other services, the problem is that they arrive in sort of gluts. So suddenly you've got a big spike in workload to to work through. So it is an area that's more likely that we're not going to be able to react quickly enough, just because it's unexpected, and B, it just sort of comes as a sudden rush, as opposed to, it's not one person a week, it's kind of suddenly 10 will appear, as it were. So.
Okay, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. Really one for Declan, just coming back to the following on from the point Mr. Grimes made, and I know we've discussed this at the Scrutiny Commission, but obviously because we're showing the deficit on send effectively off balance sheet at the government's instructions, I hasten to add, nothing we're doing, would it now be appropriate to have that as a separate risk on here? Because I see that as one of the biggest risks facing this council, of that deficit, which at some point is going to be met, no one knows how. So should that, perhaps that 1.6 or some of those being transformed perhaps into two separate headings to clearly quantify and explain to the public that what we're doing is at the behest of the government and the instructions of the government, but it is a major risk going forward.
I mean, it is one of them sort of slight oddities where apparently a problem doesn't fully exist in the eyes of government when you change the accounting regs, which does jar. I mean, we don't fully let it just accrue. We did change our policy so we cover 50% of it. So even though in theory, we don't have to, obviously it's kind of slightly nervous situation that if the sort of the bureaucrat's pen changes which way it goes, you're sort of suddenly in hock. So, but no, we can add it as a kind of I suppose it's that implications of it. I suppose we've seen it as being managed through the sort of the MTFS risk, but you're right, it does directly relate to the SCND one in terms of that cause and effect. So we can add a bit of a kind of I don't know, it's almost keeping an eye on that level of deficit if you want. It's not hard to add.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And it really is that aspect that we're doing exactly what we've been told by government in the way that government's told it. But I think the public should be made aware that there is that risk there, which councils are running, but they've got no control over.
So, Declan, am I right? We have actually provided for 50% of the deficit. Is that correct?
We've provided for a little bit more than 50, but yeah, we changed our policy sort of last year just because of the affordability of it, and we're sort of, I suppose it's trying to position ourselves where people are. So some councils haven't provided anything. So I don't know, you hope if that puts government off doing it, or kind of the other issues, and this is a bit ironic, the problem is if you move into kind of the councils needing serious support for SEND, government come along and look at how much money you've put aside and swipe that first. So you don't necessarily want to put too much money. So we're between a bit of a rock and a hard place on it. So we may be a little bit careful in what we sort of put in there, but I do take the sort of Councillor Richardson's point.
Oh, thanks, Declan. That seems, but you can't really win by the sound of it. But at least we've made some sort of provision. Thanks very much. So have we got any other questions? We haven't. So moving to recommendations, which are set out on pages 36 of the agenda pack. Regarding recommendation A, the committee is asked to approve the current status of strategic risks facing the County Council. I'm happy to move this recommendation. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Can I take this as agreed if there is no dissent? Is everybody agreed? Yep, thank you. Regarding the recommendation B, we are asked to agree a topic for our next presentation. It has been suggested we might have a presentation on property and occupants risk management. Can I take that as agreed? Yep. With regard to recommendation C, can I take the updates on the emerging risks regarding RAC, the National Risk Register for 2023 and Counterfraud as being duly noted? Is that agreed? Yeah, thank you. So now we move on to item number 10, which is an update on the audit delays and public sector auditor appointments consultations on the 23-24 audit fees as set out on pages 55 to 72 of the agenda pack. Simone Hines, the new Assistant Director, will present this item. Welcome, Simone, to your first corporate governance meeting, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Nick's actually going to introduce me. Obviously, both available to answer any questions as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Chair. So, as members will probably be aware from other reports that have come to this committee, the audit market is being stretched in two ways. Obviously, the level of assurance and associated checks required has increased, and secondly, it's becoming increasingly difficult for firms to recruit into public sector audit. So, I mean, it was an issue that was highlighted within the Redmond Review, and which our own external auditors, Grant Thornton, highlighted back in March as an issue for themselves in signing off our own accounts. Whilst LCC's 2021-22 accounts were signed off in March, 4 months after the statutory completion date, it is clear that the challenges have led to much more significant delays in the completion of many local authority audits, and in some cases, a lot worse situation. The section of the report for paragraph 6 onwards highlights the scale of the issues. We're very much in the minority in terms of the fact that our 21-22 accounts have been signed off, and some authorities go back to 2015-16 and still haven't had them completed yet. In response to the kind of the emerging issue, or the significant issue that has emerged, DLUC have issued a letter and an accompanying statement which outline what they're going to do to address the issue. They've set out a timeline for when they expect these outstanding audits to be addressed, which is set out in paragraph 10. But this will only be achievable by cutting some corners with the level of assurance that can be supplied, and that's sort of referred to in paragraph 11. Paragraph 13 to 19 cover the fact that going forwards there's a need for some prioritisation to, I guess, focus on those areas where the level of work required is proportionate to the value that any users of the accounts get from that work. And the National Audit Office, CITFA, the Financial Reporting Council are all looking at potential changes and things that can be done to help resolve capacity issues. Paragraphs 20 to 22 briefly cover the Council's own position. As it stands, our discussions with Grant Thornton have not yet revealed any likely delays to the planned sign-off date, but this will obviously be kept under review. And we have got Mary on the line, so maybe Mary from Grant Thornton, who may want to come in and make some comments on that, and maybe on the wider report in a moment as well. Paragraph 23 highlights the fact that the PSAA have recently issued a consultation on the audit scale fees. There's a response to this consultation needed by October the 10th. Our response will focus on a number of key things. Primarily, we'll obviously express our concerns at the 150% increase in fees and push for the government to make sure they provide additional funding to mitigate the impact on local authorities. We'll push for a more transparent approach to any adjustments that are made in terms of for local circumstances to be when that happens as changes. We want it to be a bit more transparent rather than it kind of just being kind of agreed. And then the final thing is about expressing our views that any measures that DLUC do introduce to resolve these backlogs should not result in further fees on top of those already kind of in the system. So that was all I was going to say, Chair.
I'll invite Mary Wan to add any comments she'd like to. Mary, so have you anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to pick up on what Mr. Washington said about the 22-23 audit progress. We do meet with your finance team on a weekly basis and individual team members more than daily. This gives us a great opportunity to iron out any wrinkles, any emerging issues. There is nothing I need to raise with committee at this point. We don't have a formal report at the moment, so as a verbal update, there isn't any key issues that I need to highlight as a hold up or an issue, and we are on track to deliver in the time we agreed by the end of the calendar year. So there is nothing I need to flag from a 22-23 perspective.
Thank you, Mary. So over to members. Has any member got any questions or queries on this item? Mr. Walter.
Yes, casting my memory back, Chair. We used to have the Audit Commission used to do our auditing. Then it was privatised because we complained about the cost we were paying to have the things audited. Price came down in the public sector, but now 150% increase. So we've gone back more now than when the Audit Commission used to do the books. So are we going to put a strong representation down about this to the LGA?
I think there's a consultation going on, and with the responses that we're going to provide are actually noted within the report, and certainly regarding the 151% increase in fees as is proposed. Yeah, there are comments regarding that. And the other, yeah, you make the point, absolutely, but I think what's happened is the government has put more stringent requirements in from the auditors. I think, as Neil has already said, that there is actually difficulty obtaining enough people to do the audits, which has resulted in quite a backlog. But no, I very much take your point, Mr. Bolter. You know, we went from the Audit Commission to the private sector, and now the fees probably are more than they would have originally had. But in honesty, we are. They're not going to change the system now. They're struggling to get people to cover it, but yeah, it's a fair point you make. But the volume of work has increased substantially. Neil, I don't know whether you want to add anything else on that, or Simone.
I'll come in on that one if I may, Chair. But you're absolutely right. In terms of the fee increase, we will be making some strong representations around concern of that level of increase, and probably calling for some additional funding to cover that increase if it goes ahead. But I think there is some acknowledgement that in terms of complexity of the accounts, both for the council in preparing the accounts and then the external audit requirements, that they have increased in complexity a huge amount over the last few years, and there is that reflection in the fee increase as well in terms of the additional work that then has to go into that audit. But I think it is something that both CIPFA and the government really do need to tackle in terms of that underlying complexity and resolving some of those issues, and also for the reader of the account. They are so complex now that I'm sure it does put off a lot of readers in trying to understand them. So I think there's some long-term solutions that are needed on both sides.
Mr. Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. I think my point was on the line that you've just said. I just wonder if we've reached a stage where, the system is broken. Whatever you do, you're not going to fix it. And the reason the system is broken is that hundreds of thousands of companies in this country have their accounts audited every year, and very few of them have any problems. Now, if we were able to work as we truly are as a business, with a balance sheet, proper accounting, but I read paragraphs 33 to 35, which is just basically CIPFA trying to protect themselves. If we got rid of CIPFA, run our accounts as every other business in this country, and we are a business, the world would be a lot easier. It would make life easier for auditors, and there'd be plenty of auditors to go forward. So should we not be recommending or pushing as a council for a drastic change on the system of audit for councils? And in fact, for bigger than that, a drastic change in the way we actually do our accounts, because I think you made the point, nobody understands them outside here. And even councillors after 10 years are still struggling because they are presented in an opaque way, I suspect, if I'm honest, so that central government can get away with their accounts not being looked at. So do we not actually need to be pressing with our colleagues across the country, at councils all levels, for a complete change of system? And hopefully that will be supported by auditors like Grant Thornton, who it would make life considerably easier for them if they didn't need a specialist department.
So could I ask you to comment on that?
Yes, of course. And I do agree in many ways, actually. I think a lot of the complexity stems back from when we adopted international financial reporting standards a few years ago, and they are not always appropriate for local government accounting. And then there's lots of sort of mitigations and accounting treatment that then tries to offset some of the impacts in our accounts, which causes that complexity. And I think until some of those underlying issues with IFRS and some of the accounting treatments, particularly around fixed assets, is addressed, then we will always have these issues. It is something that CIPFA and the Financial Reporting Council have looked at in the past in terms of trying to streamline the accounts and reduce complexity. I think the first attempt at that actually ended up increasing the complexity of it and increased the number of statements required. But that's the underlying issue that needs to be addressed to solve this system, which, as you said, is broken in many ways.
Thank you.
Mr. Richards, the only bit I would add to that is that there is no skin in the game for SIPFA. All they're doing is protecting themselves. I mean, SIPFA should be recommended doing away with themselves, as I've long advocated ever since I became a councillor. So we had accounts that we as could understand, members of the public could understand, and the world could understand. And therefore, working through SIPFA strikes me as a false economy. I did raise this with the head of SIPFA a few years ago, who gave me short shrift because he was clearly worried about his job. But I just think we've reached the stage when we can't carry on like this, because otherwise, what are the value of those audited accounts to this council? We discussed this earlier. I think every council that's gone issued a 114 notice over recent years has had its audit done. Did it show anything? How could Birmingham have got through an audit when everybody knew that from 2012 they had a liability that was so big they're never going to be able to meet it?
Mr. Richardson. I mean, I think the international standards were actually meant to provide more clarity and transparency, but I can't disagree with more a simpler form of presenting it would be welcome, so that the public could understand it, because public limited accounts are far more understandable than the local government accounts. But I mean, it is a very complex organisation we run, and there's only so far you can go to reduce the complexity. But I think even a summary for the layman in the street and councillors would be appropriate. But thanks for making the point, Mr. Richardson, and thanks for your reply, Simone. You are very much bound by what the system we're in. So perhaps some comments could be made in our submission, our consultation. Thanks very much. So, do we have any more comments or queries on this item? So, moving to the recommendations, then we're asked to note the update now provided. I'll take that as agreed. Is that agreed? Yeah. We're asked to comment on the council's proposed response to the public sector audit appointments consultation. I take it that we support the proposed responses and suggest that the comments now made be taken into consideration to all the points we've made this morning. Is that agreed? Yeah, thank you. So moving on to item 11, we have the Internal Audit Service progress and plans as set out on pages 73 to 92 of the agenda. So Neil, over to you, please, to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. Just firstly, the title of the report, I've just realised that should say progress against the plan, so apologies for that. It's a fairly short report, really, and routine. It outlines the work that has been undertaken and progress in implementing high importance recommendations. So committee will be well used to this report. So in terms of routine reporting, Appendix 1, pages 77 to 87 summarises that over a 4-month period, the assurance and consulting work that we've undertaken, where we've been involved in investigations, and then assisting other governance areas and training and development. So, okay, fairly standard. I mentioned in the report that staffing has once again remained stable for almost a year. This is something that my colleagues in other audit functions are not finding, and for me, it's really helpful to have a stable staff team. That said, the summer period can be quite quiet, obviously, and it has led to some delays in progressing and finalising audits. So this particular picture is quite minimal in terms of what's in train to come through in a future report. Appendix 2 then is pages 89 and 90, and this is the position with progress in high importance recommendations and how they're being implemented. So in summary, in the report, we've brought one audit to the table with a new high importance recommendation. There's 2 where the implementation dates have been further extended. And then I'm reasonably confident that at least one of those on the SEND side is going to be closed off the next committee, and then none of recommendations were closed off this period. As I said, that's a fairly short report for me. Gladly take any questions.
Thank you, Neil. So, does Mr. Bolton?
Actually, my usual question, have it noted. Have you got sufficient staff to fulfil your role now and have a comment on that, please? And if not, why not?
Yeah, we our last recruitment was pretty much a year ago, so October 22. And what we managed to do was to recruit a number of external candidates with good experience as well, and they've really taken to working in the local government environments. They were external candidates. We utilised the Institute of Internal Auditors through recruitment, so we managed to get a good spread of people there. Yes, we're an old team, so there could be some retirements due in the future. But yeah, we've certainly got enough to keep us going, because we cover off not just internal audit, but the risk side and the counter fraud side. And so we're thinly spread, but we've got enough.
Yes, it can. Yeah, I mean, it's good to hear that the team is actually quite stable now, and it's a year since, effectively a year since you last recruited. So no, you can't retire, Neil. No, Mr. Richardson.
I wholeheartedly recommend retirement personally, but Neil, you very kindly agreed in the pre-brief that where we've got comments, particularly on page 83, where it says advice complete, you'd actually expand on what that means for the benefit of all members of the committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I realised that column was a little bit light in terms of what that is to really help members compared to other outcomes. So on that particular reference to the one in corporate resources about an investigation into a misuse of systems. So if I could add, there was an internal disciplinary held, so the employee has been brought to account on that. But more importantly, there were some learning lessons from how that arose, and controls have been reinstated and implemented and improved in that area. So I think what Mr. Richard was quite rightly saying at briefing was there was insufficient there really in terms of showing that we've had a learning lesson from that, but things should improve.
Thank you, Mr. Richard.
Yeah, thanks for that, Neil. I think that was the point I was coming. I didn't want the committee to think you and your team hadn't followed it up, and I just didn't think Advice Complete actually gave an accurate description on what the team had done in terms of what their notice. So thank you for that, and I think that gives us far more reassurance.
Thanks, Mr. Richard. Are there any other questions or queries? No. So can I take the routine update report as being noted? Agreed? Yep. Thank you. Right, the next item is item 12, is the internal audit annual report 22-23, starting on pages 113 to 214 of the agenda pack. Okay. So yeah. So that is we haven't got the internal. No, we haven't. Sorry, it's my mistake. So ignore that. So the next item that we've got is the quarterly Treasury Management Report. So Nick, over you to present this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this report summarises the positions at the end of the first quarter of the 23-24 financial year. Paragraphs 2 to 8 are the usual reminder of what Treasury Management is, including the committee's responsibilities. So I'm not going to go through that. Paragraphs 9 to 11 pick out the key points from Link's latest economic summary, which is attached as Appendix A. Inflation obviously is now seeing some signs of falling. Although food and fuel are excluded, then inflation still was increasing. Latest figures probably now suggest that's not the case anymore. But the issue is that kind of most recent wage-related data shows significant growth. So that does kind of still suggest that there are strong inflationary pressures there, and maybe will continue for a while yet before easing. There was some positive signs with economic growth compared to previous expectations, where a recession was predicted, but there is sort of slight growth was actually what came to pass. So that was positive. Section starting at paragraph 12 summarises the position with respect to our private debt and bank risk shares. In terms of the 2017 Partners MAC4 fund, 1.3 million of capital has been returned, and in addition we received 0.7 million pounds worth of income from that fund. We've also received our first returns from the MAC6 fund. 0.3 million of capital was returned, and in addition 0.5 million of income has been received. On that fund there's still 1.2 million remains uncalled. No distributions from the Christopherson Robb Fund have yet to be received, so it's difficult to assess that, but we would expect those to come through in the next month or next period. Moving on to short-term investments, paragraph 16. That shows that the balance of short-term investments fell from 426 million at the end of the previous quarter down to 392 million. And this is in part due to some repayment of long-term debt, which I'll come back to later on. During that period, 179 million of loans with an average APR of 4.7% matured. And at the same time, we let another 152 million of new loans. They were taken out with an average APR of 5.6%, which reflected the continued upward trend on interest rates during that period. The weighted annual maturity has increased from 135 days to 179 days, which kind of reflected the attractiveness of 12 months investment rates compared to 6 months over that period. Moving on, the table in paragraph 20 shows the breakdown of the investments which were outstanding at the end of the period. And then further information is included in the diagrams, paragraph 21, which shows how the funds are split across institutions geographically and also by sovereign and institutional credit ratings. And to note, as usual, the majority of funds continue to be held within the 3 highest credit rating categories. Paragraph 23 just shows that the average weighted APR on the investment portfolio increased from 4.05% to 4.86% for this quarter. And obviously the increase continues to align closely with the Bank of England base rate. Paragraph 24 is the usual, covers the usual, whether or not any loans to counterparties have been breached, and confirms for this period that didn't happen. Now moving on to paragraph 25. So this shows the details of the long-term debt which has been repaid during this period. And as those of you who've been on the committee for some time will recall, we have consistently felt that the kind of punitive early repayment rates or premiums that would be required to pay off our long-term debt meant that repayment was not a sensible decision. However, as interest rates have continued to increase, this has meant that some of our long-term debt has moved towards a discount position, i.e. there's an immediate cash benefit of repayment. We've therefore looked to balance out sort of premium and discount payments to pay off a chunk of high interest loan, balanced together with some lower interest loan. This has been undertaken by comparing the ongoing interest payment profile with what the expected sort of internal rate of return would be over the life of the loan if some repayment was made. And obviously to do that, we've had to kind of sort of factor in what we think the market expectations will be of what will happen to interest rates over the remaining loan period. So, you know, there's a little bit of uncertainty around that. But the table shows that, table in paragraph 26 shows that we've paid around 700k now in order to save about £100,000 interest for the remaining 20 years of the loan. But we've also paid off 11.1 million of a 3.9% loan. And obviously, whilst this is below interest rates currently, which is the reason why we got a receipt of 162,000 discount. When considered over the remaining 28 years of the loan's life, you'd expect that 3.9% will be above the Bank of England base rate for the majority of that time. And for members' information, just to say, we have subsequently made 2 more chunks of debt repayment in Q2, meaning that currently £42 million of long-term debt has been repaid. And we estimate that saves us, well, it's not much of an estimate, we know that saves us £2 million worth of interest per annum. So more details on those subsequent repayments will be included, obviously, in the next quarter's report. And then finally to paragraph 30, this shows that over the course of the financial year, interest on investments is estimated to reach about £14 million, which is obviously very helpful in terms of kind of balancing some of the pressures elsewhere within the council's wider budget. Thank you, Chair. That was all I was going to say.
Thank you very much, Nick. So this is a fairly standard report. Has any members got any queries? Mr. Richardson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Could I commend the team on taking the opportunity afforded by the rates to reprofile some of our long-term debt? I think that's a brilliant job done, particularly the bit that's not in the report for the second quarter. And I think it just shows, you know, how the team are working on that on a daily basis. And I suppose my other question relates to, so the base rate didn't go up this week, largely because of supply side input costs having gone down dramatically over the last 3 months to negative figures. So are we seeing any benefit in terms of purchasing side of supply side input costs to the council in terms of stuff we have to buy?
It's probably a little bit early to say, to be honest. I think it takes a while for these things to come through because it often links to, you know, contract renewal, etc. So I think we'd probably say no, not at this stage, but we would expect to see it over the kind of, you know, next 6 months to a year as we renew those contracts.
Okay, thank you. So there are no other questions. So we're asked to note this report. Can I take that as agreed? Thank you. So we're now at the end of the meeting. So the date of the next meeting will be on Friday, the 17th of November at 10 o'clock. As mentioned at the start, I have no urgent items, so declare the meeting closed and thank you all for your attendance and your input to today's meeting. Thank you.